There's an interesting one. Well, again, warmed up. For you two that weren't here before the last hour, I showed a couple videos. I want to show you another way to do that, and then we'll get into this. This is, has anybody gone to SP TechCon, like in Boston or in San Francisco? They have something called the lightning talks. And so you get 4 minutes and you can say anything that you want to. It doesn't have to be about product. It doesn't even have to be about SharePoint. You can do whatever you want. And so actually I wrote a fairy tale, and I got up and told a fairy tale and read it like the audience was my children at bedtime. And it's one of the most talked about presentations I've ever given in the world. I get still now, I still get people commenting on that. So I'll play just a couple seconds for you so you can see it. But what we were talking about in the last session is how to develop your story. How do you actually get a story? We don't want to talk about product. We want to talk about the story. And so Ira the invoice is showing what happens when invoices aren't processed properly. So let's see what happens here. I hope that this will play out pretty good. So I figured everybody else is going to geek out. I thought I'd get a beer and a bedtime story here, so we're going to do a little fairy tale happening. So this is the sad, true story of Ira the invoice. What you're about to hear is absolutely true. Every single word. Okay? So once upon a time, there was an invoice named Ira. Here's Ira right here. He's a very, very happy invoice. His ultimate goal in life was to be stamped with a paid in full stamp. One day, Ira got his big chance. Ira, come in here, said the boss. It's time you got out into the world and earned your own keep. We're sending you to a company where they will pay you $30,000 just to show up. Keep in mind, though, that if you can convince them to pay you within 10 days of your arrival, we'll give you a $3,000 bonus. So anybody that's paid a bill understands that. If you paid in advance, you got. So that's the story. What we were really, the message behind this was for Global 360's BPM software, that we actually did that, right? But in this case, it never even talks about BPM. It doesn't talk about anything except at the end it says everything is really true here. This was actually following a client's thing. It took 33 days to process, and they lost like $3,500 on a $30,000 bill because they couldn't pay it on time. They just couldn't do it. So it took 33 days to play it. When they implemented the system, it took 2 days. So that's where the fairy tale came in. So found the story there. That's good. All right. Let's make sure we're all in the right place here. There it is. Okay, the community engagement project. I did an intro before. Do you guys know who I am? Okay. I don't have to introduce myself? Okay.
Walter Fish.
Okay, next question. The purpose of this project was twofold. One, it is an ebook. Remember, we talked about that in the last session. If you can find material that you can put into an ebook, you've really got something that has legs, because you can take pieces of the ebook as different parts of content and distribute them in different ways. The purpose of this is, I run one of the largest communities in the world, if not the largest community in the world, at nothing but SharePoint. We have 140,000 unique visitors, a couple 100,000 page views a month, you know, that kind of stuff. So I wanted to document the process because I get so many calls to say, how did you do that? I mean, it went from 0 to nothing in the matter of a year to a year and a half. How did you actually get that? So I wanted to document the process so that if you're trying to do something like this, you'll have a grid that you can work from. One of the things that this is based on is Sadie Van Buren's SharePoint maturity model. Have you guys seen that before, Sadie's work? She and I used to present together that. It's a very exciting piece. I think it's very well done.
There's 5 frameworks within this. The idea is there's a 100 level to up to 400 level. You go in, you say, okay, where do I fit in this framework? So each of the vertical things, the columns, are different competencies. And the different rows are where do you fit in that competency? Are you good? You're great? Or you're not even started with it yet? So that's me. Nothing but SharePoint. We're okay with all that stuff. Hey, do you know about sharing the point? You do. What's sharing the point? What does it do?
It was a tour by several MVPs last year, right? Around the world.
Yeah, that's me, but I'm not an MVP, but that's close. I have MVPs behind me. How's it? Now, it was me, it's these guys right here. What we do is once or twice a year, we try to find an underserved community in the world and go there and help them with their SharePoint community. The last one we did is we were in Africa. And so we did 5 locations, plus we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro while we were there, which was cool. The one before that was cool too. We were in South America, and we went to Antarctica while we were down there. So it's a fun process. But in the long run, we're doing stuff like this. This is building community right here. Actually, this is outside the Nelson Glacier. That was a phenomenal day. Okay, let's get started. So what we want to look at is the different grids that we're going to have 5 different grids that we're looking at. When we're making this case for community in the business, or for yourself for that matter, if you're trying to build your own community, what we're looking at here is how are you going to align that with your business objectives? We have to start there. What is the business objective of starting this community effort? And so many people don't do that, whether it's social media or community or whatever you want to call it. It's we have to have it. Why? Because everybody else has it. Our competitors have it. It's not a good enough reason, because 3 to 6 months down the road, the bean counters are going to show up and say, justify the investment that we put into this, or we're going to close it down. I don't care how much buy-in you had at the beginning, 6 to 9 months down the road, somebody's going to say, how is this making us money? So what we have to do in order to help that is we have to select business goals. Let's see. It's like you have to look at the 100 level. Most people start with none, and we go up here, in this direction here. And then there's arbitrary goals. Like, we want to get 10,000 Facebook likes. What the hell's the value of 10,000 Facebook likes? In all honesty, there isn't any value on there that you can trace back to a business objective. How many Twitter followers you have. It really doesn't matter unless you've got a way to track those followers and see if you really engage them in the business process, then you've got something. So if you set up a business objective, we want to generate 5 leads a month, and we can track them back to our Twitter followers. Now you've got social media aligned with a business objective. Okay. The next thing that we're going to have to do in order to find that there's an alignment is we have to monitor and listen to what's going on. That means you've got to set up something that you can actually track the process with. So again, look at that bottom level 100. Most people when they start are going to put a big red circle around none on most of these. How many people are already running a community effort right now? Just curious. Where are you in your business objectives, the alignment? Okay, I got a red circle here.
Between 100 and 200.
All right, right about here. So he's got some arbitrary goals set. What do you guys measure? What's your metrics?
There isn't really. It is a community project, as in residents.
Yeah.
And the university merging and helping improve that community.
Uh-huh.
So it's quite transient at the moment. So it's completely away from SharePoint, but it's so relevant to what you're talking about.
Okay, good. So the takeaway right now for you is at least move up into here. And now that you know that this is BS, I'm trying to be polite here, see if you can go directly to here. See if you can get to the 300 level. Anybody help me out here. What's another business objective that you could align with social media or a community?
thinking of one of the customers I have
Yeah.
is get aligned in product research. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're tire companies,
Mm-hmm.
and they are doing it in so many places and have engineers all over the world,
Right.
but they are not aligned. So get them aligned.
Okay.
That would be one of my
Nice.
internal.
Yes, the internal. He's building internal community here. Is yours external? What are you guys doing?
It's SharePoint User Group.
Okay. Which one?
In Barcelona.
Oh, I'm supposed to go. Isn't there something in Madrid this summer?
Yes.
Yes, I'm trying to go. I've been invited. I'm trying to get there. All right. So once you set up these goals, how are you going to monitor it? Right? And then from there, once you start monitoring, what measurements are you going to use to know whether you're effective or not? I think once you see the process, it starts to make sense, right? And then you go here, then analyze your measurements and then report. This column is key. Most people skip this in the planning process. This is what's going to keep you funded. Because if you can have all this in place and then build really cool looking graphic reports, you're going to get your funding. I think that Peter Morville said it right. You guys know Peter Morville? He wrote Ambient Findability, out of Ann Arbor guy. He said, the prettiest pictures get the funding. And if you remember that, it works. I guarantee it works. Whether you're building a prototype, if you build a prototype and you just make it look cool, whether it's functional or not, you're going to get the funding. Oliver Blanchard, who is the brand builder, if you're not following Olivia, you might want to do that. He actually wrote a book called Return on Social Media, or ROI on Social, something like that. And we have to start with the business objectives. If we don't, what's going to happen? I just want to make sure it got in. What happens if we don't have business objectives? You're going to lose your funding. That's the bottom line for me, is how can you know if the game is over if there's no goal line? All right, so ROI tracking. This is a phenomenal statistic. Everybody wants to do it, but nobody's figured out how to do it. Wow. Does that leave a hole in the market for you guys to fill? Yeah. If you want a career outside of SharePoint, you know where to go now. There we go. So once we've got the business objectives set up, we're in alignment, our social media and our community program is in alignment with the business, now we have to start the grunt work. How are we going to start providing and managing content to that community? And most of this is built off of my work with end user SharePoint, nothing but branding, the sites that I've helped build up. All right. This deck is online, by the way. You can actually go flip through it now. It's on SlideShare. And you're more than welcome. I've got a download of this entire as a ebook, and every one of these squares has a full description and documentation on it. So this is just the overview to get you interested in that. So one of the things that we want to look at when we first started is, what's the software going to be like to build our community? You might be building an external community in real life. You might not need that software channel. But most people right now are trying to build a global visibility, so they're going to start with a website. A lot of the things that I'm seeing right now when people first start, it looks like they were building in 1999. It's a static website. There's nothing really there. It's just brochureware is all it is. That's what you got for a website. If you're really trying to build a community, you have to find some way in order for people to participate. And that's why a lot of people do blogs. I'm going to put out a blog post, and I'm going to beg people to come and comment on it. I've got a site right now called nothingbutfood.com, where I just document the stuff that I cook every day in the restaurants that I go to. I actually got my first comment last week. I got all excited. It's kind of cool. So a blog and a wiki actually have participation. That's the 200 level, because now you've got some kind of participation. This is a tough one. and you've all seen it before. It's orphaned forums. You go, everything, you got 500 questions, and in the reply column, it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's called an orphaned forum. I started something here called Stump the Panel. Has anybody used Stump the Panel? That's on end user SharePoint. And it's, I got to my authors. I have about 200 or 300 people that have written for me. And so I got to the authors that really participate a lot, and I said, if I stand up a Q&A forum, will you monitor it? Will you commit to monitoring it? So I had monitors on it the day that I opened. That's, if you don't have that type of engagement, then you're going to sit in front of your forum all day long answering questions yourself, and it's going to get orphaned because you've got a real job. So one of the things that happens here, though, on those forums, if you can get it to work, has anybody heard of Laura Rogers, the DataView Web Park Queen? Laura, right? Laura started on my forum here, right? She came in, I came in one day and I saw answers, Laura Rogers, Laura Rogers. I thought, who in the world is Laura Rogers? And I found out she was working as an administrator for a SharePoint system in a hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. And we got to know each other. And then she started writing for me, and now she works for 911, and then they got bought by Rackspace, so she's moved up the chain really well. But the idea was, it started here on the forum answering questions. You're going to need somebody to help you monitor that, or you're going to have to get evangelists from the community that get excited enough to come and participate. And then at the top end, you're going to look at commercial software. This is the big play. This is enterprise level. When you're talking about this at the 400 level, all this is enterprise. It's going to cost you 50 grand to get in on a commercial version of community software. You're talking about a Lithium, a Telligent, or a Jive, or something like that. You've got major investment if you're going to do that across the enterprise. Okay, content management. Where does it start? In your bathrobe at your desk in the morning. It's yourself. That's where content starts. Literally for end user SharePoint, what I was doing is I was working on an AIDS vaccine research project that coordinated research from 5 different labs around the world, all the way from the blood draw in Africa through the amino acid sequencing in the Los Alamos database. And it was like an 18-step process over 8 months. And so I was using SharePoint to manage that. But what I was doing is, when I'd find a cool little solution, because I was just using out-of-the-box SharePoint. I'm not a developer. I was using out-of-the-box SharePoint MOS. And I'd find a cool little solution, and I would put it up on the site, end-user SharePoint. And people started to recognize those solutions as, that's something that I can use. That's the takeaway on this one. Please provide things, simple things that people can use, and you will immediately start getting engagement with the community. As simple as I told you last time, putting a weather magnet up. A weather magnet, go to weather.com, get the embed code, put it in a content editor web part, boom. And not just put it on your site, but here's the download button, download this for free. Every geek in the building will tell you, oh, nobody's going to, what is that? It's just cut and paste. There's nothing to that. But I tell you, after 10,000 downloads and innumerable emails saying, thank you so much, I never would have figured out how to do this, I knew I was on to something. So I started providing those things like that, like little, just tiny web parts that would work. So I started getting that. So I provided those in the articles. And then people started talking about those articles on there's components on their sites. And then I started participating in other forums, and I found people that had a voice, like Chris Quick, Desi Lunsford. Those are 2 authors, my first authors, that I found on other people's forums that said, I wrote to them and said, you know, your voice is like mine. We're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the business uses of SharePoint. So they became my first authors. Desi wrote a 36-part series of articles on the calculated column. Everything you'd ever want to know about the calculated column is in that series. It's phenomenal. So that was pretty cool. And then at some time you can become an aggregator. That means look across the community. Is there a way that you can be the curator and suck that content in? We've got if you go to Nothing But SharePoint now, we've got a blog aggregator where we called up like 200 or 300 bloggers and say, we'd like to include you in our aggregator. So now you're acting as a curator for the entire community. So first off, when you start off, literally, there probably isn't a schedule for content development. I mean, how often are you going to post? I give you a number, and it's going to be, it's going to be hard to swallow. But you need to post a minimum of once a day. Laughing already, right? We had to post once a day because think about what happens here if you're posting once a week, okay? If you're posting once a week, I go to your site on Monday, and it's the best thing I've ever seen in the world. This is incredible. I read the article. This is phenomenal. This guy knows what he's talking about. I go back on Wednesday to see what's new. Nothing's changed. I come back a third time, and nothing's changed. There's no need for me to go back. The site is static. Perception-wise for me as the user. For you, the writer, it's about all the time you've got is once a week to write an article, right? So that's the dilemma. You have to find some way to put a schedule out. If you're going to do a chosen day a week, then you might want to put it on the blog itself. I put new content here every Tuesday so that people that come back can see that there's going to be something new. But the real thing is start getting consistent. And you do that through editorial calendar. When you download the ebook from here, which is free, I don't even think I have a registration for it. You just go get it. It actually comes with a editorial calendar worksheet so that you can actually lay everything out. And this is key. This is the thing that'll keep you on track. You could actually build it in Outlook if you want so that you can get those ticklers. I'm supposed to provide an article tomorrow. Give yourself a one-day leeway kind of thing. Then you look at frequency. This right here is pretty useless. If you're doing bi-monthly, you know, it's less than a hobby if you're doing it bi-monthly. Weekly, daily is what we're looking for, and multiple times per day is what you're really looking for. I know that sounds weird, and you can never do it by yourself unless you don't have a job, right? So I learned this from, does anybody follow TechCrunch? Do you know TechCrunch? You might want to put that on your radar if you don't. But Michael Arrington and I started about the same time. And Michael, I was watching his site, and it was almost something happened one week where he started posting more than an article a day. And his traffic went like that. And then he started posting, he started getting people to write for him. He started posting 5 to 10 times a day, just like that. The biggest technical site in the world for tech news. Got bought by AOL for like $30 million. But the idea that happened there is people were checking in multiple times a day to see what was going on because Michael had his ear to the ground on what was happening in Silicon Valley. You have to find out what that is for you. Is there enough content that you can post at least once a day or consistently so that you can drive people to your community? Okay, community growth. This right here, first time you get a comment on your site, you guys remember that? Have you got sites up? First time you got your comment? Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you're right back. Oh, that's a brilliant observation. So once you start getting those, this will actually drive you to actually do some more. That's the cool part about this. And when you start getting daily comments, and the thing that I'd like you to think about there is you have to have the barriers to participation be as low as you can make them. We don't need your name, email address, phone number, company that you work for, date of birth, how many kids have you got in order to make a comment on the site, right? So there's ways that you can manage this. Everybody heard of WordPress? Do you use WordPress for your blog? Yeah, good. Phenomenal piece of software. Love it. I've used it for years. And one of the things they have built into WordPress is something called Akismet. It's a spam blocker, a comment spam blocker, so that you can lower that barriers to participation so that anybody can comment, and yet you can monitor the spam and keep it out. It's very cool. And then as the community grows, you're starting to get daily comments and then multiple comments on external sites. People start talking about your stuff on external sites. That's when you know you've hit the gold mine there. That's a good one. Okay? And then external participation by you. I can't stress this one enough. If you're at this level here, what I'd like you to put in your daily outlook to do just once a day in the morning, it only takes 5 minutes, is go comment on somebody else's site. Either answer one question in a forum or comment on somebody else's site, because that's how you start to be recognized in the community. I started here. Dustin Miller had something called SharePoint U, or SharePoint University, and he had some really nice forums going. And I started commenting once a day on the business stuff. I mean, there's so much geek stuff in there. I don't do code. I don't care about code. I care about solutions. So I could go and help people visualize solutions. I got to be recognized by that, and it drove people to my site. This guy knows what he's talking about, right? And then you get an article or publication. Right now, everybody is looking for content. If you have something to say, no matter how simple, you can send it to me, end user SharePoint. You can send it to Barbara at CMS Wire. I mean, there's all kinds of places you can send this. That's when your visibility and your credibility. This doesn't give you credibility yet. That gives you credibility being printed on somebody else's site. And everybody that publishes you is going to put your bio at the bottom with a link over to your site. And then from there, you start speaking events. We're very, very lucky in the SharePoint community, because this is not in all communities, but SharePoint Saturday is your entranceway into speaking engagements. I was at the very, very first SharePoint Saturday in Virginia Beach 5 years ago. Susan Lennon started that, and it just took off like wildfire. And one of the things that has really been nice is when I go in and I'll speak at those, all the local speakers get the first slots. It's really cool. So if you're local, SharePoint Saturday is where you can start. And then you can end up speaking here for Steve. You can go to SP TechCon and speak for Dave. You've got SharePoint Fest in Denver and Dallas and Chicago with David Wilhelm. You get Debbie Ireland down in Australia that's doing Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Hong Kong. There's all kinds of places to speak once you start working on this one. Is anybody a speaker? Anybody does speaking? What do you do? What's your topic?
I usually speak on development kind of things, but I also try to speak sometimes about the community.
Great. And where are you speaking? Where do you speak?
I've been speaking on SharePoint Saturdays,
Right.
and I've spoken at the European SharePoint Conference.
Nice.
And
Is that Helen's? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Forgot to put her in that list. The other thing I forgot about is user groups. All user groups are looking. There's two things that user groups are looking for: speakers and swag. So that's another way to get participation. If you have a really good book, swag giveaways, yeah. If you have a book, take a couple of your books down to the local user group, let them give them away. Even if it's an ebook, print one out. Get a good print of it and take it out. So one of the things you want to do is start getting comments. A little gimmick that you can use to get yourself started is if you put a number in the title, top 5, worst 10, something like that, it really does, for some reason, people feel they have to look at that so that they can say, do I agree or not? I don't know what it is. I know some blogs, every single article has a number in it. It's okay, that's kind of overdoing it. But so you can see that. So how do you get community engagement? How do you start getting community engagement? This is an interesting one right here. This level here. You know what a lurker is? It's somebody that will go and will never, ever in any way participate on your site other than to suck up the information. And that's the majority of your audience. Over 99% of your audience will never, ever comment. I don't care what you do. You can put car keys, you can give them a car for every comment they put on there. They're still not going to do it. Okay. So once you get a commenter, the first thing you want to do is you really want to acknowledge that person right away. It's not even a thanks, it's start a dialogue. See if you can get the dialogue going like that, right? And then from there, you can take these commenters and they become contributors. Some of the best articles I've ever seen are from people that have commented, and I wrote back and said, that's worth an article. Your comment alone is worth an article. And then a couple days later, I got an article in my email box. Dave, how did you end up writing for me? How did we do that?
God, it's quite a while ago now. I think it was just, I had an idea, implemented a solution in my company, and we had a quick chat, and we thought, this is quite interesting, and other people would get some value out of it. And,
Yeah.
good, yeah.
One of the hardest things I have at End User SharePoint is convincing people that their idea is not too simple. Everybody already knows that. I mean, I don't, and it's almost embarrassing. I would embarrass myself by putting that out there. It's so simple. I put a content editor web part with a snippet of JavaScript out there and had 10,000 downloads. Nothing's too simple. Okay. So you've got a commenter who has become a contributor. And then at that point, you start looking at the other places that are needed in the community. At Stump the Panel, I needed people to manage Stump the Panel. And the person that really jumped on board there, he was a commenter, then a contributor. He's the moderator now of Stump the Panel, and that's Eric Alexander. These are people, it's interesting, you develop relationships of trust online without ever meeting people. About 2 years ago, the community in general decided we're really going to get to know each other in person, so they showed up at the big SharePoint conference with their Twitter handle on the front of their shirt. Oh, that's you. You're much bigger than your Twitter picture, you know. And it was great because you so you now have got that going on. How easy it is to participate in your community. If you have any barriers at all, you've just cut that infinitesimal amount of people that will participate in half, if there's any barrier whatsoever. So in this case, make it as easy to contribute as possible. And I'll leave it at that because I think that's an obvious one. There's something called, you might look it up, it's called the penny barrier. Have you heard of the penny barrier before? It's harder to get somebody to spend 1 penny on the internet than it is to spend $100 after they spent that first penny. If you can break that resistance against spending a really small amount of money, then you've got the trust because, okay, I delivered something for 1 penny. He's trustworthy. He got it to me. Now you can ask for real money because they trusted. That's the penny barrier. Look at it that way. And then community trust. First of all, you get the internal trust. Does your company, do the people surrounding you trust you? That's what internal trust is, what the message is. And then you start looking at the different levels of contribution until you get public acceptance. I'm very, very lucky with how I've been accepted by the community. I happened to be in the right place at the right time and provided something that people needed, and that trust has come. You can't buy it. You have to participate, and you have to get the acceptance that this guy is trustworthy, it's somebody I want to know, even if it's just online. That's what that column's going to do for you, so that you can now start building relationships. I've got some diagrams for you in a second that'll show you these, but we talked about it in the previous session. It's called trust-based relationships. Right now, when you are dealing with people, you've got 500 people that follow you on Facebook or Twitter or something, those are extremely weak ties. The research over decades has shown the most ties that you can really, really have and manage well, 150 is about the maximum that you can have. You know, I've got 6,000, 7,000 so followers on Twitter. Those are extremely, extremely weak ties. But I know from doing the conference circuit, I've got 100 to 150 people I can trust. So that number has been verified by me. I think I'm comfortable with that. But once you get above 150, it gets weaker and weaker. The farther you get from the original source, the weaker it's going to get. So you got to work on relationships. And then you get automated recognition. This is for participation now. This is automated recognition for participation. The funny story on this one, if you've ever had somebody that you followed on Twitter and you got an email back within 5 seconds, says, thank you so much. You got a DM, actually a direct message. Thank you so much for following me. You know that's not a human behind that, right? We're looking for human engagement. We're looking for real humans behind this thing. So that's what this comes from. I can tell you what happened with Dave. I can almost guarantee you that this is a story. Dave went to the site and found something he liked. He made a comment, right? And then I have people's email addresses when they comment on the site, and I can send them a personal, that was a great comment. And I think there's a whole idea behind this. And even if he said no at the time, I don't have time, he got back to me later and said, I've got this idea, all right? I'm way open to that. Everybody's open to this. And then you start getting public recognition, and that is through the comments section. Again, I can't stress it. If you can get comments into the stream, especially for your authors, that's huge. That's huge. I have people that write their own blogs, big people, like major SharePoint people that will put it on their blog and then send me a copy of it. Would you mind cross-posting on end-user SharePoint? Because it's the community site. It's the visibility that you want to see, right? So they want the public recognition. And then recognition beyond community is when you start getting, in this case, outside the SharePoint ecosystem. I've got visibility outside of SharePoint now because of the community and social media work that I do. So now I'm crossing industries. This is the idea on how it happens, how you can cross industries here. This is from Michael Wu at Lithium. And he says, what happens is this is a community. This whole thing is one community in general. And the idea is that there's a topic of discussion at the center that people are interested in. And maybe only a few people are interested in each topic. That's okay. It's niche communities within the umbrella. Think about this now. As you're building out your own community, I'm not talking about SharePoint, I'm talking about for yourself. You're building out a community. What we want to do is recognize what are the niche groups that I can support within the community. In my case, end users, IT pro, business users, business decision makers, and developers. So I thought, okay, I got 4 niche groups. That's why we have nothing but SharePoint now instead of end user SharePoint, because it was growing outside of end user SharePoint. So I hooked up with Jeremy Thake, who was running the Dev Wiki, and said we needed to combine. So we put those together and we started. Now the interesting thing here is these conversations remain isolated. These are just people that are talking as small. They comment on each other's posts or they send stuff back and forth. But the real thing happens is when the conversations start crossing into various niche groups. That's the real thing that happens. Then the community starts to coalesce as a whole. And once this starts to happen, different industries, that I could pull back out more. And some of these conversations even break out of the SharePoint industry and come over. So what we're trying to do is support the niche groups here and generate crosstalk between the various groups in your community. I love his diagrams like that. Social engagement. Let me back up a step to slow down because I've been talking so much. You like that one? Does that make sense? Have you thought about that before? That we need to support smaller groups. We're all talking about building a community or doing something, but it really is started at this level in order to reach here. Have you seen that in your work? Ah, okay. Nobody's saying anything, so that's a new idea. Good. Social engagement. It's where the rubber meets the road now, because this is the way it works. This is how you're going to get that visibility that you're looking for. First thing is, have you set up your social outlets? Have you set up all of these? Plus, if you believe in Google Plus, have you set up Google Plus? So you get these. Now, what we want to do here is there monetary value here? No. What we're looking for is visibility and the generation of conversation that will move people where you want them to go. These are not product pitches. This is not sales. This is relationship building. And then you start doing this. Can you spread that message through video, whatever channel? I know that Duck's Raymond's side, Duck's likes to use Vimeo. I like to use YouTube because I can control the channels. I've actually started a new channel called 30 in 30, which is 30 interviews in 30 days, which is on SoundCloud, which is audio only, which you can embed on your site. It's kind of a cool technology. What I did is I got asked to go speak at the New Media Conference in Denver a couple months ago. Again, broke outside the SharePoint industry. It was kind of cool. right? And so what I did is I found the top influencers in the social media space. Remember we talked about influencers the past hour? And then I called them on the phone. It said, you know, I really like the work that you're doing. Would you like to talk about it? Again, what can I do for you? And so I got the interviews, but in the process, I got the information that I needed to help me be a better social media manager. So we've got that. You've got your outlets going. That's the biggest outlet right there, word of mouth. If your mom is talking about it, you're gold, right? All right. Social frequency, minimum. There's a couple tools that will help you with this. There's one called Buffer. Is anybody using Buffer? If you're not, you might want to write that one down. What it does is it allows you, here, let me pull it up, because I'm on the net here. You can see here. I think you'll like this one. It's a Chrome plugin. Let's say that I go to a page, I'll go to TechCrunch so that you can see what TechCrunch looks like too. Okay, so Michael's getting, this is updating 15 to 20 times a day now with articles, right? So I click on this article and I say that I like it. What Buffer allows me to do is I click this button and it allows me to hook up to all of my social networks and schedule this so that it goes out at a specific time. So it's going to schedule, I found this page, and it gives the page name and things like that. You can manage that. But what it does is you can go up and set up a schedule so that I say, these tweets only go out every half hour. And so it looks like I'm online 24 hours a day. And in essence, I really am, because what I'm doing is every half hour I'm pushing out something that I found that I think my followers are going to be interested in. Okay, a little key for you that a lot of people don't know. If you're going to use this technique, what you need to do is schedule this some people use 4 hours, some people use 6 hours. It has to be in a 24-hour cycle so that you can hit all of your audience. If you send it at 8 in the morning, you send it at 12, you send it at 4, and then 8 at night, you're going to hit your spectrum of audience. If you send it once, it's going to disappear in the ether for the people that were just there at that time. So you've got that going on. Anybody using Hootsuite? Right. I bailed on TweetDeck a while back. Who's using TweetDeck now? If you are, you need to bail on it because they're not going to support it anymore unless you use the online version. I got around that by using their old version before, which didn't break before it was bought, right? And now they're saying we're not going to support the old version. We're going to stop the fire hose going into that old version. So I went to Hootsuite, and it's okay. But what Hootsuite also has added now is they've got a button where you can do this too. So now you can actually manage all of that updating through Hootsuite too. So just choose your poison. I mean, choose what you're going to do. I use Hootsuite and Buffer, but that's just the way I am about it. I use Buffer because I can literally go in and set a schedule on the half hour. If I'm using Hootsuite, I have to manage each individual one to say when to send it out. So I use Hootsuite for something immediate. I use Buffer for something that I want to put in the scheduling.
So with Buffer you can put the schedule.
Yes. Let me see if I can, hold on just a second. So here's Buffer. What's nice about here too is when you look at Buffer, it actually gives you unknown error occurred. Wouldn't you know it? Let's go to analytics and see. Am I online? I should be. I won't even worry about it. I'll call Leo to get that worked out. But you can see I set up a schedule here that I'm sending it out at specific times each day. So when you hit that button, it just puts it in your scheduler. This right here is the lamest part of Buffer because you have to do each time individually and then you can't copy it over to your other channels. You have to do it all over again. It took me about 20 minutes to set it up, which is really annoying, but once it got set up, it's okay. Who's going to use Buffer? Just curious. Who's going to use Buffer? Who's going to use Hootsuite? No? All right. That's too bad. I'd like you to see the analytics on this thing because it's very nicely done. Okay. All right, so we've got social frequency. How are you going to listen to it? Google Alerts is going away, by the way. They're pulling that project. That's gone. Google Reader's gone. They're consolidating all into Google Plus, it looks like. Trying to consolidate it all. Anyway, you got to find some kind of listening mechanism. Google Alerts was free. There's a couple more. Feedly is the one that everybody's using now instead of Google Alerts, if you want to check that out. And then you have integrated software right there, so you can actually put some software out that actually does all the searching for you, like Radian 6, you know, but it's very expensive. We're talking about enterprise level on that. There's so many free tools that you can hunt down to actually monitor this stuff that you really have to have some big bucks in the bank and a real reason to buy this stuff now. There's too much free stuff. And when you're really going to track it, you're going to hire somebody to act as a market analyst, because by using this knowledge and tracking all this, you can actually find out what people are searching on, how they're finding you, you know, what terms they're using, so you can actually drive engagement through Google for people to find you more. Then resource allocation. At first, it's nobody but you. Resources meaning people that are going to help you do this. And then you're going to get volunteers, then you're going to get a paid coordinator. Most of the time, if you're in a company, and they want a community manager, they're going to go to somebody and say, you just volunteered to be the community manager. That's what it used to, right? Even up to a few years ago. You heard the word SharePoint? You're our SharePoint administrator. All right. And then metrics management. Go back to the business objectives. Remember, what do we got? What are we trying to do, and is it aligned with the business objectives? So this is from Mark Fidelman, who writes for Forbes. Mark and I are pretty close because we worked on some stuff together here. But he's got the maturity model here, which is very, very interesting. He says when people set up their communities the first time, 60% are ad hoc. That means there's no plan whatsoever, right? And then you go into it, there's an awareness, and then there's integration, and then it's optimized. But the idea is, if you even start here, you're ahead of 60% of the game already. You know, the awareness of there's things that you have to do to make this work. You just don't stand it up. The analogy that everybody uses is, you know, build it and they will come. You know, that's the anti-analysis there. And it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. There's another one that I used to use called bottlenose, which idea was right, but it wasn't strong enough emotionally for me to stay with it, but you might check it out. It's what happens is if there's things that you're interested in, it becomes the center of the circle here. And then if somebody's talking about something that you're interested in, you click on iPad, that becomes the center of the circle and it rebuilds the connections around it. So it's a connector. It finds out the connections. I think the idea here, more for me than for social media, is I like to see that done for document management. Just if you're looking for an app to build in your spare time. That this should be a document and it should dynamically know what other things in the company relate to that document around here and how strong that relationship tie is. And so let's say that Bill's talking about it, Martha has a document over here, these things, and you can click on this and it rebuilds again. Okay, where are the strong ties for the stuff that she's working on? So that the system itself knows what the relationships are between the documents and your resources. If I was going to build something from scratch, that's what I would build right there. You're saying, yes, you're a developer. You can see it, right? Yeah. This interface is not hard to build. That's a relatively interface. What the problem is you're dependent upon metadata to do the correct job in order to find what the relationships are. However, if you find something like Pingar, have you heard of Pingar before? If you get a technology like Pingar, then what it does is the documents already know without the metadata what they are and what they relate to. Pingar actually scans through and develops those relationships. And if you put this type of information on that type of technology, you got a winner, in my view, because the prettiest pictures win the funding. All right. I'm going to blow through this one because I think it's self-aware. If you are not visible on Google, you're invisible. Bottom line, that's what this slide is. And I hate to say that, but when I look at the traffic for end user SharePoint, as big as that site is, and as visible as it is, 70% of the traffic comes from Google. And I'm very lucky that if you go and type in a subject in SharePoint, I happen to be up at the top. I mean, I have a lot of credibility according to the algorithm for the engine. And it has more to do with the amount of content and the length of time I've been there. I've got to have 3,000 articles on the site. The site's been open since 2007. People from all over the world are pointing to it. That's all built into this here, this analysis here. That's what's giving me credibility on Google. So let's see, keywords, description, first paragraph. This is kind of dated. External backlinks. Once you start getting recognition in the industry and other sites are pointing to you legitimately, that's where your recognition comes from. All right, so when I just did a word search for SharePoint, 84 million results came back. You got to find a way to filter and own some kind of section of SharePoint before you can actually get found. So the conclusion here is, I went to Antarctica, but the idea from this slide is that I do travel around the world talking about community. I love building community. I mean, that's what I wake up in the morning for. That's what gets me going. That's my passion. And it's taken me all the way down to Antarctica, to the top of Kilimanjaro, to the Great Wall of China, and all over the rest of the world. It's just phenomenal. If you can find out what it is that you're passionate about, and you can find the people that have the same passion that you do, that's where you get the real relationships and the real community started. So I think that's what you want to be looking for. This is a downloadable. I'm going to have to remember where it is. If you want to leave a card with me or something, I'll even email it to you. I'll get you the white paper, and then there's also an editorial calendar worksheet that comes with it. All right? Feedback. Is that going to help you get started with your community? Can I get some feedback on that? Too dense, too much? There's a lot there.
There is, and it's clearly a long process.
Yeah.
to get through this, but
Yeah.
It certainly highlighted a few things I can work on.
You know, what I would suggest is you ignore all the gobbledygook and just quickly go through all 5 frameworks and circle where you are in each one. And it will tell you immediately what you have to work on. Mark, you had something? Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking some of the things you mentioned at the end kind of links into the work of Sir Ken Robinson, the educationist.
Right, yeah.
The words you were talking about, some of the ideas you were thinking about empowering people and so forth, very similar to some of the things I've heard, and some of the TED things
Sure.
that were mentioned earlier on. Certainly his, I think his 2006 TEDx
Right.
talk, which is great because he's such a funny person as well. So he's got a great stand-up,
Right.
which means you're really sort of connecting with what he's talking about. Some of your ideas there seem to really resonate with what Ken was talking about.
Great. I'll give you one thing to walk away with, because you reminded me of TED. Is it .com now? Did they move it over to .com or is it still .org? One thing that I'll leave you with, and I think you'll laugh, but it will ring true for you. Matt, we still have sound on board? Okay. And then I'll leave you with, it's a very short one.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So, notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So, over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, Ted. Thanks.
Pretty powerful message. Done in a very nice way. It's the story again, right? It's the story. So thank you guys. I hope you walk, you can clap if you want. I hope you walk away with that. But